If you got a scary letter in the mail recently about your SBA EIDL loan, listen up. A lot of different ways we can deal with this. You should be concerned, but perhaps not alarmed. Federal government, of course, is a big, scary beast and something you need to take very seriously. But first thing to keep in mind is that an SBA EIDL loan debt is very different than a tax debt, for example. Although they are debts to the federal government, are considered loans which could be dischargeable in a Chapter 11, Chapter 7 type situation. Watching this, I'm assuming that you have a business, probably, that received an SBA EIDL loan in conjunction with COVID, as so many of us, myself included, did. It's important to know what your options are. So perhaps you got a letter recently, a collections letter. What does that mean? Well, of course, you have to read it and see what it says. If it's just a letter from a collection agency, all that means is they're taking additional efforts to try to collect against you. And what can they actually do? Can they go out and put a lien on your real estate and garnish your bank accounts and do things like that? Not really, not at this stage. That's not something that you need to be concerned about at this stage. However, you do need to be concerned, and this is something that needs to be dealt with. Do not ignore it. You want to pay attention to it. Most likely, if you're receiving a letter like that, it means that you're in default on your SBA EIDL loans and you need to take action, and you probably need to talk to an attorney to understand what your rights are and the best path forward in your situation, because everybody's situation is different. Best path for you is going to depend on your circumstances and what's going on with your business, what's going on with you personally. So what are your options? Okay. You could try to work things out with the SBA, right? And there's several different programs they have. You could do their loan modification program to try to ask for basically a restructuring, renegotiation of the loan. Now, of course, this isn't like dealing with a bank where you're talking to a person who's got some flexibility and maybe needs to check with their boss. We're talking about the federal government. They've got regulations that change all the time, very somewhat rigid. You've got to go through their process, fill out their forms, and of course, you can apply for a loan modification, which it would basically be dealing with the payments. And they've got several different programs, and they've got one in particular, the Hardship Accommodation Plan, that will allow you to make lower payments for some period of time. You could potentially get a deferral on those payments, but those options are limited. They're not going to defer the payments forever. So at some point, certainly you're almost certainly going to want to start with that and see if that's an option. See if you can get the hardship accommodation, see if you can get your payments reduced, see if you can get a deferral. That'll at least buy you some time to work through this. But if you can't afford to make the payments, this is probably not a problem that's going away. It probably needs to be dealt with, depending on how large the loan is, right? If we're talking about a $20,000 EIDL loan, that's a much different situation than a $200,000 or a $2 million EIDL loan that you personally guaranteed, which, by the way, very important thing to understand. Most likely, if you've got a business that is maybe struggling and you're not sure if you should shut it down and how it might affect you personally, you need to know, did I personally guarantee that SBA EIDL loan? For the COVID EIDL loans, the SBA was requiring personal guarantees for loans, I believe, in excess of $200,000. So if your loan was for less than that, then you probably didn't personally guarantee it. If it's for more than that, you probably did. But don't guess, don't assume, read the paperwork. You need to read your paperwork and see. And it's usually at the end, is there something on there that says guarantee? Is there something that says personal guarantee? If you personally guaranteed the loan, now you're personally responsible for it. You can't just shut down the company and not pay. They can still come after you personally. If you didn't personally guarantee it, perhaps just shutting down the company and not making the payments, they may not have recourse against you unless you use the money improperly, right? There, of course, were all sorts of rules on how you were supposed to spend the money, and if it was just spent on regular business expenses, you might not have an issue there. But certainly, every case is you're definitely going to want to talk to an attorney to understand your situation. So, obviously want to start with potentially getting deferments and lower payments with the SBA if you can. Sometimes it can be a challenge getting a hold of people there, dealing with the federal government, going through their process, getting them to agree to things. You can hopefully get a hardship accommodation deferral. Another potential option is an offer in compromise, very similar to what happens sometimes with taxes, where you basically offer to settle in a lump sum. Of course, you have to have the money to be able to do that, and you need to be able to say, hey, look, I can't afford to pay this, $200,000 EIDL loan, but I can't afford to pay $20,000, and that's all I have. That's all I can afford to pay. Will you accept that? And then you'll submit a bunch of information to try to make your case, and they say yes or no. The issue, of course, anytime you're dealing with trying to settle or get an offer in compromise or anything like that, is the other side has to agree to it, right? So now, um, something like an offer in compromise isn't automatic. They have to approve it. They have to agree to it. And what if they don't? Or what if it's just taking forever and this is hanging out there and causing you sleepless nights? There certainly are ways that we can, advance the ball forward. One of the ways that's very helpful to a lot of my clients is a Chapter 11 filing for the business or personally. A lot of people don't realize that, oh, I thought Chapter 11 was for big corporations. It is, but it's also for small businesses and even small business owners. It's really available to everyone. Now, there needs to be enough money at stake to justify going through the Chapter 11 process and all of the work and attorney's fees that go into that. But if we're talking about hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in debt that will never get paid, it very well might make sense to go through the Chapter 11 process and force a repayment plan, because that's basically what Chapter 11 does. It doesn't require all of your creditors to, including the SBA, to necessarily agree to, they don't have to affirmatively agree to a settlement like they would have to do with an offer in compromise. They can just, you can make your proposal in your Chapter 11 plan based on, there's all sorts of rules. You can't just offer to pay them $1 if you could actually afford more. You've got to show, okay, this is what we can afford to pay. We make the proposal in the Chapter 11 plan, and assuming you've met all the requirements and the plan gets approved by a federal judge, that's it. That's your new payment plan, and the rest of the debt gets wiped out. It doesn't require the SBA to actually approve anything. You're getting a judge to approve it in Chapter 11. They just have to not object, right? And, potentially other creditors could object. So the Chapter 11 does get a little bit complicated, but that is, in a lot of scenarios, does make a lot of sense for a business or even a person to basically force a repayment plan and deal really with all of your debts all at once, not just the SBA debt, credit card debt, loans, all of that. Like, we can just deal with all of it through the Chapter 11 process. So that is definitely something worth looking into. If you're dealing with large debts in hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, you're definitely going to want to, in any event, talk to an attorney. If you are here in Georgia, where we're located, I would encourage you to reach out. Our website is kecklegal.com. Again, that's www.kecklegal.com. Thanks, everybody.